Welcome into the Inquirer podcast, a special live edition of this. Appreciate all you guys joining us on our live YouTube channel. It's Jeremy Werner, Derek Piper, and another big day for Illinois basketball. Derek Piper, as they do, in fact, land top 40 composite guard Jeremiah Fears, number 44 in the 24/7 sports rankings, and number 31 in the composite. I know ESPN has him as a top 20 prospect nationally, but another huge kid out of Joliet, Illinois, fellow Will County kid. I always love seeing Will County represented at Illinois, as a Will County native myself. But Derek Piper, obviously a big addition for Brad Underwood and his team. Tell everybody, what is Illinois getting in Jeremiah Fears, four-star guard in the class of 2025?
A guy who's got an insane amount of offensive talent. 6'3", just dynamic ball handler. We talked about it before. Kind of comes from that Steph Curry generation. You can see it in the play style with a deep assortment of tricks in his bag off the dribble, the step backs, just the flow that he has offensively. There's really nothing he can't do in terms of getting to his spots, in terms of just having a really smooth jump shot. Now we'll talk about some of the areas that he can improve, and one of those is getting more consistent from the outside. He's shown that in the past of being a guy that when he's on can be a knockdown shooter, but here of late it's been a little bit more of a streaky deal with him from the outside. But just someone that you can really build around what he already has, a very solid base and exciting base offensively. I think when you look at him coming up as a prospect, of course, compared a lot to his brother, they played in the same backcourt at Joliet West, and Jeremy Fears Jr. being a eventual McDonald's All-American, a guy that was a high priority target for Illinois for a long time until the very end. Fears Jr. is more of that pure point guard, that pass first guy that already has a pretty nice build to him. He's strong. He's got good burst, good defender. Jeremiah is more slender, more of a scorer. And so there's some difference there as far as that goes. But I think that in time, it'll be important for him to add strength. It'd be important, though. And I think one thing on that note, though, while he's been known as a scorer, I was really impressed this past spring and summer watching him. Number one, he's playing up a level with Brad Beal Elite on the UIBL. He's playing 17U as a 16-year-old and a guy that they put the ball in his hands a lot. I thought that as a playmaker, a guy seeing the floor, I thought he showed encouraging signs for someone that is known more as a shot maker than he is as a set-the-table guy, a guy that sees things and makes other people around him better. So I think he's progressed in that sense. And you should continue to build on that. And the main things are get stronger, get more efficient with the outside shot in particular. And but anyone that's ranked in the top 50, you're going to love adding that type of guy, especially one from your home state, and to get it done early, because I think a lot of guys who play as an underage guy on the 17U circuit usually come back and explode that next year, and he's already got a lot of offers. If this thing were to drag out into the spring and the summer, where maybe he has a huge EYBL coming up, and maybe this thing really boils in terms of the competition and whatnot, Illinois getting it done early is obviously a big asset for them to just get him on board.
And just to put this in perspective, Derek, I got a story coming out tomorrow about Brad Underwood, the highest rated guys that he has landed in his tenure. And it's kind of a fun exercise just to go through and see which of these guys lived up to the hype, which guys didn't make an impact, and maybe which guys were kind of underrated here. But he's number 4. The 4th highest rated by the composite ratings at a 9.881. That's just behind Adam Miller, who is a top 30 prospect, obviously. Ayo Dosunmu, we know how big of an impact he made. And now the number 1 get that Brad Underwood has gotten is Merez Johnson after he rises a little bit today. We'll talk a little bit about Merez here before we get out of here. But that's a significant recruiting win. So before we dive back into the on the court, what was the key? What stood out to you about Illinois' ability to land one of the better prospects in the country in Jeremiah Fears?
I think you have to start with the fact that they pivoted away from his brother. And I'll admit that I said it, and I think a lot of people wondered it, that it looked for a while like, could Illinois really get in there and be a big-time player with that? And look, I mean, I think as things have gone along, it's shown the type of relationship that Jeff Alexander built with the family, able to massage some things out as things got a little complicated. The relationship complicated when you tell his brother that, hey, ultimately we're going in a different direction, when essentially he was pretty much in the bag for Illinois at the time. And he had a really nice landing spot and going to Michigan State, and it worked out fine for him. It's not like, things fell off a cliff and he was left scrambling, but you know how things work with the relationships, and when you might move a different direction or things don't work out, how that can sour relationships, that can poison the well, so to speak. You always worry about those type of things. But I think with Illinois, it's that Jeremiah had legitimate and continued interest in the Illini. I think that the program's at a place where there's an undeniable level of appeal about what Illinois is doing right now. They're winning at a pretty good level, obviously needed in the NCAA tournament, but consistently in the top tier of the Big Ten. They've developed some guys that really Brad Underwood's been able to put on his resume of Ayo Dosunmu, and the way that Terrence Shannon, since having him, has been able to add to his game and further his draft stock. And obviously Coleman Hawkins, and just the career that Trent Frazier had as a guy that was, an undersized scorer coming out of high school, then became a great defender and type of, all league guy that's very well beloved at Illinois. And I think for a home state, and his dad, Jeremy Fears Sr., has talked a lot about this, is just the way you're remembered if you're a home state legend. If you're a guy that comes to Illinois, is one of their own and really shows out. And I think Illinois, with the way they did it with Ayo, of just branding him and marketing him and putting him on a stage to do all that he did, and then obviously to be in a position to jump to the next level, those are all things that really appealed to the family, that appealed to Jeremiah. And then obviously the effort and the legwork that Jeff did. Tim Anderson jumped in on this over the last handful of months to up that effort, and then Brad did his part as well. So they recruited him harder than really anybody out there. I think we can talk about it too. Some of the other potential threats, I thought, to Illinois early on, like Michigan, there's a lot of questions about Juwan Howard. Kentucky with Chin Coleman, they were flirting around for a while, and Cal was even out in Arizona back in the fall, but they never offered. So they weren't really that big player. Michigan State, I just don't think that was something that here recently they put a whole lot of thought into, and he wasn't listing them on his top 5. But I just think Illinois made the most sense. And then really it was more about, could they close it now versus waiting it out and seeing how that would unfold.
I do feel great for Jeff Alexander here. He recruited Jeremy Jr. so well and had it there on a platter, right? And just the fit wasn't there. They decided with Ty Rogers, some other guys that they had, like, can they have another non-shooter on the court? Jeremiah's different than his brother, as you said, and he can shoot the rock. So one thing we focus so much on in-state recruiting, and it's fun to talk prep recruiting again, Derek, because so much of it is transfer heavy. And I understand why. You're seeing the results with Illinois the last few years, but this would now be the 5th top 60 prospect that Brad Underwood has gotten since 2018. Ayo, Adam Miller, Ty Rogers with an asterisk because he'd moved in the final years, a Michigan native, and Merez Johnson. But in that a top tier of prospect, at least the ones who are staying closer to home or still live around here, they're doing well. And I think that's a sign of their resurgence. I think that's a sign of Ayo's success. And I think it's a sign of how these younger guys now consider Illinois. Like Jeremiah Fears probably does not remember a time that Illinois basketball was not good. The last time last time they legitimately missed the tournament, 2018, right? He was how old? 10? 9? How much is he actually watching college basketball then? So I think Illinois has gotten past that time where people remember Illinois as like, yeah, that program's not that good right now. Like, and I think with John Gross, that became a problem. Like, people didn't see Illinois as 2005, 2000s Illinois anymore. Most of those kids didn't remember Bill Self ever being at that program or remember watching Darren Williams. They remember watching Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn and now the guys who are playing out, Terrence Shannon, all these guys. So, I think it's a sign of where this program has come under Brad Underwood on the court.
Agree with all that. Yeah, it was hard for John to get that first point guard because you couldn't really sell. He struggled to sell DJ Cooper, who was at Ohio, and then not being able to, you could talk about D Brown and Darren Williams, but those are guys that when you recruit at the time, the current generation, they didn't remember them all that well as far as them in college and whatnot. So having recent examples of Ayo and just being able to put a number of other guys that we've talked about in position to better their draft stock, in position to just be able to have a lot of success in college has been something that they've been able to show and showcase. So the appeal of wanting to play at Illinois, where you're used to sellout crowds, you're used to national TV and in the conversation in the Big Ten and ranked a lot. Like, those are things that they can go out and sell to people. And that's what Jeremiah probably associates with Illinois, which obviously wasn't the case a handful of years ago. So I think that is I think that with Jeremiah obviously was at play. I think another thing is NIL. Let's be honest. I think that you're now dealing with the current environment of NIL, and I think with the marketability of a home state guy, there's a lot of potential there. You're viewed differently, and maybe even more of a attachment from the donor base, those that get involved in the NIL side, to try to market him, to try to get those marketing deals. And then I think in general, Illinois has really shaped up well of having a strong NIL backing. So we know that's played in the portal. I think that obviously is something that in recruiting you can utilize as well. And I think that that's something that Jeremiah and his family looked at as well. Like, this is not only about a spot to showcase yourself. This can be a business decision too. And I'm not saying it just came down to dollars and cents with him, but I think that was part of the conversation is, all right, we're going to find a place where, you know, he's a very popular player, but not only just in the state, but nationally. Like he has a game that a lot of people just love watching, and he's got 56,000 followers or whatever it is on Instagram. Like, this is a guy that's got a lot of national appeal that he wants to take advantage of, and Illinois is putting him in a position to do that.
Just reminds me, man, I feel bad for Io that he wasn't here during the NIL era.
Sheesh, right?
or D, obviously we talk about, but Io, man, like just how much he's beloved here. All right, Derek, how does he fit on this team? It's so difficult of a conversation anymore because you don't know if guys are going to stick around. Like, you know, Underwood's recruited guards pretty well. It's about keeping them around for a long time. I mean, you think of Jaden Epps and Sky Clark and Andre Cabello, Adam Miller, Brandon Pajimski. Like, they're recruiting good talent there. But, like, how do you think he fits with a Jace Butler and Merez Johnson in the class of 2024, and potentially Ty Rodgers, we think would be a part of this. Amani Hansberry, we think would be a part of this if these guys stick it out. Like, what do you think of that core and how Jeremiah Fears fits in it?
I like the fit a lot, especially with Jace Butler. I know we talked about that a little bit with the just differing play styles, different dynamic of as Jeremiah adds to his frame, he'll be a more slender type of guard, but having a bigger body guy like Jace at 6'4", who's strong, he'll be able to seek out the proper matchups for him. But as you see here, a guy that can just go get you one. And that's always a good thing to be able to break down a defense. And like I said, as he's developed in terms of seeing the floor that he showed over the summer, I think you can play either Jace or Jeremiah on or off the ball. Two guys that can push it in transition whenever the other one gets it. So I think Jace is more the natural playmaker, the more natural pass first type of operator. And I think as of Illinois is just thinking about big picture and down the road right now, they'll probably think of Jace more of that playmaking guy that they'll maybe run some more stuff through. But and then Jeremiah can maybe be opened up for spot up shots and just running him off of screens and some things to get him looks. But as you see there, I mean, he's got an ability even as a secondary creator to find other guys too. So put that with Merez Johnson, who's just on the fringe of being a 5-star. And I love that I wrote it in my What It Means piece, like to have Merez and Jeremiah both of that USA basketball minicamp back in October. I mean, there was a stretch there where Illinois didn't see a lot of guys that Illinois was attached to that were playing in those. So
yeah, and Io, Adam Miller were both part of Team USA. Yeah, and like
Ty Rodgers as well. Yeah,
I forgot Ty Rodgers too. Thanks for adding that. Like having those guys around, Derek. Dudes recruit dudes. Dudes want to play with dudes. Kofi came here in large part because Io was here. Right. So like when you get these level of prospects, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier. Brett Bielema says it all the time. Like the players recruit each other as well as anybody. So to get guys that are playing at that level, they know Jeremiah and Merez are going to Illinois. And of course, they're a year apart. Reminder, there was some talk of Jeremiah reclassing in 2024. He is a class of 2025 guy. So he's still 2 years away from coming to Illinois. But I think that's just another sign of, guys know some guys go to Illinois and play good basketball. Like, we'll see what happens with Terrence Shannon with everything off the court. But with everything checked out, like he's an NBA level player. Coleman Hawkins is an NBA level player, right? And we think Merez can be that. We think Jeremiah Fears has a ceiling of being that. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but it's just another example of Illinois having more of a national presence when they're playing for USA basketball.
100%. And yeah, he has the attention of people like those that are making the decisions on who to invite to USA basketball, and you even get NBA scouts going to those type of things. So I think that they see him, and I've heard this from people even outside of Jeremiah's camp, is just, he's viewed as the current age of guard that you see in the NBA, a scoring guard that can make some do a lot of things off the dribble, and then will develop in time as a playmaker. But to circle it back to what you said about the foundation, I think Amani, there's a lot to be excited about if he sticks through the process and how he develops in that front court with him and Merez Johnson, two guys that Amani was ranked in that top 50, top 60 range, and then obviously Merez very highly touted as well. I think the wings is still the one thing that you kind of look at and say that needs to be the filler. And really, Brad, the last handful of years has gone to the portal to really get those wing additions. So how that plays out, and I know attrition always happens, and then you just don't know as far as the portal additions too. But I think in the backcourt, particularly, like Dre Gibbs-Longhorn could still be in the mix when Jeremiah shows up, and I think that would be interesting how that plays out. And yeah, it'd be great to have him. It'd be great to have him in that mix. I think Dre adds a little something different too. I think would be the most athletic of the three between Jason and Jeremiah and himself, and a guy that can do a lot in transition and be a really good defender. So I like the foundation that they've built so far. And again, it's hard to project too far because we're talking 2 seasons away, and then the portal and whatnot. But just to get these type of guys and to see even the developmental pieces or the under the radar pieces that you get, like a Jason Jackson, like a Jace Butler, then rise in the rankings after you got him, shows that those might have been pretty good evaluations.
Yeah, I made this kind of comp. This is just kind of the way they play. It's not like this is definitely going to happen, but Jace Butler and Jeremiah Fears remind me of what Michigan State has in its backcourt right now with AJ Hogarth, this big-bodied kind of pass first guard, and he can shoot it a little bit. He's just not as dynamic off the dribble. But then Jeremiah Fears kind of reminds you of Tyson Walker with his ability, just that first step to get by people, to be maybe a secondary ball handler and create for others, but just go off at times. So that's a pretty good backcourt. No matter what you think about Michigan State, that's a pretty good backcourt. So I think that could be kind of the blueprint for what Illinois is doing here. Derek, you mentioned a little bit, adding strength, of course, for any 16, 17-year-old. It's going to be really, really important. But what else is key to Jeremiah in his developmental process once he gets to Illinois basketball?
I think with the strength piece, it'll help him to be more competitive at the defensive end and just being able to hold his own. And I'm not saying he's a bad defender or anything like that. I don't honestly. It's still a little early to judge that, but I think that as he adds strength, it'll allow him to just handle contact that obviously you go through at the defensive end, and then when you're going off the bounce and kind of really getting into the teeth of the defense, the bumps that you take, guys trying to knock you off balance, guys trying to push you off your spots. That's something that he needs to get. But like you said, anybody that's 16 years old, you're talking about a weight room. You're talking about the difference between what they're doing now versus when they get to college. But the shot making, he's got deep range. I like his release is really smooth, but he's got to make it at a higher and more consistent clip, like he did, I think, earlier in his high school tenure when he first came up with Joliet West. Like, okay, this is a prolific shot maker. He's a little small. Will he grow? Those are type of things that you wondered with him early. Now that he's grown a little bit, look, he's playing high level of competition. I'll give him that. That's one thing that you look at the UIBL, you look at playing at Arizona Compass Prep, playing a national schedule. It could be he could have stayed at Joliet West, or obviously been in another high school situation where he could be putting up a lot, maybe more efficient numbers, higher scoring numbers, but not facing the level of competition. But if you do look at it, I think it was 28% from three in the EYBL last year, and then this year, still some of the streakiness from the outside shot has shown up as well. So just really dialing into that and being able to knock it down and continue to build on some of the encouraging signs as a playmaker. I think that's really key as a guy that's 6 foot, between 6'2", 6'3", and he's listed at 6'3". If he's going to have the ball in his hands, be able to see the floor and make good decisions. And that's to have multiple capable ball handlers and guys that can make other guys better, guys you can run offense through. That's when an offense can really click at a high level, and it's harder to lock in on maybe one in particular guy if more can be that versatile and dynamic.
Especially when you can still keep size with Jace Butler at 6'4", and Jeremiah, they got listed at 6'3", even if that's a 6'1" or 6'2" in real life, like that's still not a tiny guy. We know Brad Underwood doesn't like tiny guards, as he likes to say. All right, this is the start to the class of 2025, Derek. What should we? It's early. They just wrapped up class of 2024, but what should we expect in that prep class? And who are some guys to know that Jeremiah fears could be playing alongside in a few years?
I think there's a lot of ability to be able to add more and be more aggressive and taking more high school prospects in this class. And we'll see if it plays out that way. It's just the way that Brad and the staff have talked about it, because you look at 24, they didn't want to overstack up because you can go back in the portal, which you'll always be able to do, but there's just going to be more guys in the portal, or just the current volume that we're seeing will be the same this upcoming offseason because you have another cycle of free COVID year guys. And after this,
and the other thing, Derek, is you use 5 seniors, right?
Yeah.
Like 5 really in Hawkins, Shannon, Domas, Carmen, Guerrier. So you don't want to load up on prep guys in this class when you got to replace production, even if you have some promising young talent.
100%. Yep. And I think that as you look this offseason, if there is an opportunity to take some multi-year guys that you like, then maybe that would affect how large the 25 group is. Obviously, Jeremiah is someone that they really loved enough and talented enough. They wanted on board early. I think wings, like I said, will be something that they will look at. Then again, that's not to say that they won't still kind of lean into having some of those positions be portal avenues. So they'll really try to get some older guys that have played in college that are physically strong. You're still going to want, Brad's still going to want older teams. I don't think that all of a sudden it's going to be another group of just, freshmen and sophomores largely, as, we saw last year was a large part of their roster. So, but in particular, I think with the wing group, with also the forward, kind of the 4 spot, I think they've got the 5 pretty well figured out with Merez, with Jason, who can play a 4 or a 5. I think probably more so with a stretch 4 at this point, although he's a year or so once he even gets on campus away from being a guy that impacts you. Amani, we'll see. Like the jump shot can maybe allow him to play a little bit more 4, but I still think small ball 5 is something that is probably his biggest strength right now. I think the way he complements Merez will be interesting, but I think they will be aggressive with some national guys. Like Chuck Love is someone at La Lumiere that's 6'6", is a guy that's from the Midwest. I believe he's originally from Nebraska, that Chester Frazier is really locked in on, and he's good build, able to go to the rim, and also shoots it at a decent clip, kind of in that top 50 range. As far as rankings, definitely in the top 75. Jeff Alexander will try to follow this up with he really loves Nicholas Kamenia, who's out on the West Coast, California. They're battling UCLA, who I know is not in a good place right now in terms of their current team, but Gonzaga has done a pretty good job. He's like a 6'8", really skilled guy. Kind of emulates a little bit of like a Robbie Hummel type.
Gonzaga, man, not even ranked, not going to make the tournament.
Hey,
UCLA, Nick Cronin, man, I imagine covering that guy right now. He seems like a cheery fella.
I know, right?
But yeah,
opening for Jeff. I mean,
open up there.
A guy who deserves probably some good karma because of what happened with Jeremy Fears Jr. And then him having to, anytime he checks a mock draft and seeing Zachary Perrine on there, it's got to just make him really probably sick to his stomach, because that was a bad break for Jeff. But yeah, just kind of and then we'll see what happens with Phoenix Gill, a guy I talked to at the game yesterday, and we'll see where things go from here. But they'll look in-state at a guy like that as well. And further down, like 26 with Solarski, Gabe Solarski from Bennett Academy, 27 with the freshmen that are in that group, Jackson Davis, Davion Thompson.
Just stay home, kids. Stay in the state of Illinois for a while. Everybody's going to prep school.
Some of these in-state guys from the state, obviously Jeremiah Lepa came back, will be coming back. There's a lot of potential to continue this role of let's keep some of the top guys in the state.
Yeah. All right. I do want to talk about the rankings updates today at 24/7 Sports for the class of 2024. Merez Johnson up to number 27, which puts him, Derek, as we talked about earlier, he's now the highest ranked, highest rated prospect that Brad Underwood has gotten. And kudos to the Illini staff, because at one point, like everyone was talking about James Brown at St. Rita is this top 30 prospect, and Merez was kind of this maybe rawer prospect, but Illinois was recruiting both heavily, but Merez was their guy, and he was kind of like in the 60s at that point. He's now up to number 27 in the rankings, and they held on to him throughout that entire rise. Mrez has been all Illinois the entire time. He's come to campus almost every other home game, it feels like, during the last 2 years. But what a rise for him, Derek. What do you see as the reason behind? How has he gotten better since he committed to Illinois?
He's been able to add more polish offensively, and that's, I know a lot of people usually associate it, and I think it's key, especially when you think about NBA potential and whatnot, the jump shot, but just the ability to finish left hand, right hand around the rim, and being a little bit more diverse in the way he can score it. I think early on it was a catch and dunk guy, not a guy that even back to the basket was making a lot of those moves comfortably. He was just kind of just still learning and having to add that to his game. But over this past summer, seeing him in UIBL, where obviously he dominated at Peach Jam, was probably the best big man amongst a national group of prospects. Like the ability to obviously be a monster on the glass, which he's pretty much always been. A very active and athletic defender, very good rim runner. But to be able to get it inside and face guys up and drive them a little bit, to be able to spin off one way and finish with a left and offhand potentially. So he's been able to just refine his offensive game. And in the meantime, has gotten a little bit better at the jumper, like can actually shoot it from three and has made some of those. He's made some 15 to 18 feet jumpers here recently. And then he's just continued to get stronger. He's just physically dominant in a lot of instances against other people. So I think that it's just been a guy that's added more confidence offensively too. And then just continuing to build on what are already great strengths of his, which is his motor, his toughness, his rebounding, and all of that. So fans should be thrilled about what he's putting together, and wait until he gets with Fletch. And oh boy, look out.
Yeah. So the other thing, Chester Frazier, what a win. Jace Butler rises. At the beginning of September, Derek, he was number 270 in the country when Illinois was pushing, when him and Mikey Lewis both decided to visit campus. Then he commits to Illinois, rises a little bit up to 168. He just earned a 4th star today by 24/7 Sports. He's up to 95, one of the top 100 players in the class of 2024. What did Chester Frazier get right, and what took us a while to catch up to him?
Well, he saw the fact that this is a guy that, I think from a standpoint of a recruiter, you trust your eyes, you trust your ability to go and recognize building blocks, things you can get out of a player, not just rely on rankings and whatnot. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches like to say, but look, I mean, Jace, part of it is he's maybe playing in a smaller high school out on the West Coast, just outside of San Francisco. And then to go, and he did play in the Adidas circuit as far as AAU goes. But when you look at, it was really June that at a big event in Phoenix, Section 7, that I know that they were already aware of him, but Jeff Alexander was out there and saw him and was really impressed. I know that he was one of the standouts there, but at the time, he just really wasn't a recognizable name on the national scene or a guy that had high major offers at all. And Illinois made the call to push for him. And the fact that it wasn't like he jumps in the rankings and then you respond to that and try to get in there, you had to make a call, and a tough one maybe at the time, and one that I think some fans who weren't familiar with him and got familiar with Mikey Lewis and liked him and understood he was a top 100 recruit, like, what are we doing here? We're taking a guy that's unranked. And, Lewis is a 4-star top 100 guy with high major offers. But Butler, as you've seen highlights and just stat lines that he's put up in high school, he's having a really good year. And then once I had a reason to obviously dive in and watch some more of his stuff, we talk about his size, talk about his feel for the game. And then just a great pull-up jumper that's very smooth. And I think the three ball, which when you look at some of the stats over the summer, was inconsistent. It looks like he's getting that up a little bit better and being able to knock that down. So that was one that they felt like was an underrated guy that they always had confidence in. They thought he was severely underrated, and now I'm sure that they're happy to see him in the top 100.
Don't care about they won't care about that though. It's good to have. It's good to have a 4-star there. Jason Jackson, number 117, still on the fringe of that 3-star rating there, just down a little bit from 110. It's probably guys rising a little bit in that. Anything else you want to add on the recruiting side? I got one more thing I want to hit on, Derek, before we get out of here.
No, I think this really in terms of, like I said earlier, like being able to lock this thing down now, to not push this thing. Because when he decided not to reclass to 2024, I think part of his original setting of I think it was January 13th, he originally set as his decision date. That coincided with momentum moving towards his idea of reclassing to 24. Then when he decides not to do that, it seemed to open things up a little bit, and maybe he'd wait longer. How long would that take? The fact that Illinois kind of pushed the gas and said, we'd really like to close this thing down and make sure that we don't go out and recruit other people at your position, that you don't then push this so far that then it kind of gets murky in terms of the competition and whatnot. That Illinois was recruiting him the hardest, had a great sell, and they pushed him to make a decision, and he did. So that will help, because I wouldn't be surprised if he goes EYBL and lights it up, and maybe then Kentucky would have wanted him, or a Kansas who offered him, who wasn't really recruiting him all that much, would have picked things up, or so on and so forth. So I think it's just the timing wise helped Illinois a lot, and you got to give them credit for locking it down.
One piece of news I want to hit on today before we get out of here, because I'm sure there's an Illinois assistant that'll be attached to this, is DePaul has fired Coach Tony Stubblefield, who had a very bad tenure. Just 2 years, but 25 and 39 overall, a 39% winning percentage. That follows Dave Latow's second stint there. That did not go very well. Oliver Purnell before that in 5 seasons went 54 and 105. Jerry Wainwright before that, 59 and 80. It's a program that people around in the 80s remember as could be one of the nationally relevant programs, but man, they haven't been to an NCAA tournament since 2004. I was in high school. I had a full head of hair at that time, Derek. This is a program that has really, really struggled, but Tim Anderson was an assistant coach there. I'd imagine he's going to be somewhere on this list. My opinion, Derek, they have to go get a proven head coach. Like they need, maybe it's a bounce back guy, but I just think they need to throw a bunch of money out there and get somebody who might be on the bounce back, might be willing to take what has been one of the worst high major jobs here of the last 2 decades. But man, like DePaul basketball should be better than this. I know, having an off-campus place, but Wintrust Arena is a nice place. But they got to get somebody to energize that fan base.
For sure. It's a really tough job, which shows there in the records that the previous coaches have had. I think that it's tough when you're in Chicago, which is so many presences there recruiting wise, that it's going to be really hard to get the top talent, with Illinois being up like they are, with it being so close to different outlets for Big Ten schools to come in there. And really, if you're at the national level, you're talking Kansas, you're talking Kentucky, Duke and whatnot. So, but there is a nice realm of next tier guys in terms of, not to say that they couldn't, get the right guy with a good appeal there and re-energize the program and maybe drum up enough NIL money to keep some of that talent home. It does help that the transfer portal is there to even pick up some scraps from other places that maybe didn't work out and get a guy on a second run in terms of bringing somebody in. So I agree with you as far as a name. I just think you kind of got to, I wouldn't be shocked, or just if I'm advising, to think outside the box a little bit. Like,
I got a name. All
right.
Like I would, these are a couple other names. I got one I really love here. The Illinois fans would probably be interested in. I don't think they're going to steal this guy at this point because he's having a good year. Like if he was having a worse year, you might have a parachute job available for him. Porter Moser loves Chicago. He's such a huge Cubs fan. He misses going to Wrigley Field, I'm sure. But he's got things going again at Oklahoma. They'll probably make the tournament. But I would throw a bunch of money at him to see it. Bounce back guy, Bryce Drew. I think Bryce Drew, what he's doing at Grand Canyon, I think he can fit there. I think he's a good coach. Vanderbilt is a very, very tough job along the lines of a DePaul. He was getting some talent there. It was still one of his first jobs. So I'm interested to see if they could get somebody like that. Brian Wardle's doing really well at Bradley. I know it's just a minor step up for him, but it is a little bit of a step up. But I got the name. Depends on something else happening. But stick with me. Juwan Howard. If Michigan moves on from Juwan Howard, I think DePaul would hit a home run with him. You can question some coaching things. You can not look, but him coming home to Chicago, The old heads would love that, Derek. He can get talent. We have seen that. And you talk about a nationally relevant hire. Like, think of the names I just laid out: Dave Leitao, Jerry Wainwright, Oliver Purnell was at Clemson, did a pretty decent job there. And then, like Stubblefield, an assistant coach at Oregon, right? Like, you get Juwan Howard, people are talking about you. Like, the Chicago media outlets are wanting to talk to you and go cover your games. So if that does happen, like I think Juwan Howard would probably still want to make a lot of money in his life, and DePaul can pay him a lot of money more than the NBA is an assistant job. Like sorry, Gus, I don't think the NBA is clamoring for Juwan Howard as a head coach, as you said the other night. But like I think that could be a really good fit for both sides there.
It's very interesting, and I get it. Like, as far as the presence in Chicago, a guy that's really well liked, whatever gym he's going to walk into from a recruiting standpoint, that'd be very interesting. It'd be a splash hire that would get a lot of headlines and get a lot of attention, and a nice fresh start for him.
If you want to think outside the box and think big, Derek, that's my name.
Yeah, Jace could transfer from Michigan and be able to play his COVID year over there, and then he can tussle with some more. A new crop of heated coaches. You get Hurley at UConn, you get Pitino at St. John's. There's a lot of fire and spiciness that could be available to him in a different conference as well. So
DePaul should look at St. John's and say, we have to do something like that. Will Wade has been a name that comes up. Sure. Like that would make me feel icky, but Will Wade can coach and win basketball games and get talent. So they got to do something like that. They can't go this. I mean, I think Chris Lowry would be a good candidate, Northwestern assistant, bounce back SIU head coach from a couple of years ago. Like, he'd shown he can be a head coach and run a program, but I think they got to do something bigger than that. We'll see if they do.
Yeah, and I know, is it Josh Schertz from Indiana State, who's doing a good job there, but I don't know if that's a sexy enough name. It's interesting. Maybe you would.
How about this? John says, hire the other Pitino, Rich Pitino. New Mexico's probably a better job.
Yeah.
He's doing really well at New Mexico.
He is. He's doing a good job there for sure.
Yeah.
Tim Anderson, would you just say, hey, let's just try to funnel Mean Streets to DePaul and see if that works?
That's a man. If that would be on, he'd be on my list. I think Tim's a good coach. It'd
be risky. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, you look at Roger Powell, who's a more proven assistant coach. Like, would they look at Roger, who's having, I think, a pretty decent year at Valparaiso, but it's his first year as a head coach? That would make more sense than Tim Anderson to me. I think there's got to be another step before you get to the high major level, which DePaul does not act like a high major, but they are, in fact, a Big East program. So, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. It's just amazing how bad they've been for so long.
Josh Pastner's another name that's come up.
I like Josh.
Why don't you just look at the field of 68's rotating crew of
right.
fired coaches?
Chris Mack, so you want to get back in the business? I think a media gig is better than the ball.
Enjoying that probably a little bit more.
All right, Illinois, another big addition. Jeremiah Fears coming to Champaign in 2025 adds to this really impressive list of talent. I guess Jeremiah said AJ DeBansa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. 5-star recruit in the class of 2025 says he's recruiting him. Derek, do you want to comment on that?
It's swinging pretty high, and like I said, Jeremiah is
number one well-known class of 2025. By the way,
yeah, well-known guy that has relationships across his dealings in USA basketball, Nike, UIBL, and whatnot. I don't know. That's probably not something that Illinois is going to be able to pull off, in my opinion, but it's interesting. He dropped the name and he's got some time to maybe work on it. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. We got one more name. Couple people, Brian and Mark both say D Brown at Roosevelt. That's a big leap. That's a big leap up from Roosevelt D2 to that. But hey, D's doing a pretty good job so far. Isaac Trier did a great feature on him, by the way. Go check that out if you haven't a couple months ago. But D seems like he's, at least on a path here, taking a road less traveled, might get a D1 opportunity here down the line.
That'd be another one that would make a little bit of noise. Now, he has even offered up, that being D, that he'll recruit guys that don't know who he was as a player. So that's something that he would have to to battle. But in terms of like an infectious personality and a hard worker and a guy that's respected by Chicago, you can do worse than D Brown, in my opinion. And I would love to see him get another chance at the D1 level, even if it is like, a higher paid assistant than jumping up. But
yes,
eventually seeing him back is something I hope we get to see.
19-10 last year, 16-2 to start this season for D Brown. Yeah, if I were Juwan Howard, I'd hire D Brown as my head assistant. That's what I would do.
Yeah, there you go.
That'd be a pretty good path right there. All right, for Derek Piper, everybody, thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Almost 500 people here live on the live stream. We appreciate you guys. Hit the like button on the way out. Subscribe. Hit the notifications bell as well. We will be back after the Northwestern game as Illinois heads on the road. Terrence Shannon heads on the road for the first time since returning to the team. So it'll be very interesting to see that as well. But thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. And everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.